Today I'm going to tell you the top 5 things you need to know to successfully start up a successful business. Now, this is based off the top 5 things I learned from the book Rework by Jason Fried. Now, this book is incredible. It hit my radar because I heard a lot of successful business people who had made millions talk about this book, saying stuff like, oh man, if I only had read this book 5 years ago, things would have been so much quicker and faster and easier. So my ears started perking up. That's what I always seek to find. Anyhow, let's just get to it. The top 5 things that you can learn from Rework. And let's start with number 5. Number 5 is the whole myth that you should get as much investor money as you can. There's a lot of startup companies who like to show off and say, oh, we raised $5 million from investors. The author of Rework, who created a very, very successful business and ran it for over 10 years, he says that this is not true. And you're probably hurting yourself in the long run by doing this. And his whole point is that if you give away too much control of your company by taking money, then you lose control of the company and where it's going and so forth. And that's huge. Now, the thing with this piece of advice is I've heard much different opinions on this. Sorry for the bad grammar. Many different opinions on this. And I think I find this very intriguing. I've heard advice given on the exact opposite end, where they say stuff like business owners have to be, you have to be not selfish at all. Some business owners are just way too selfish and they won't give up any control of their company or ownership because they want complete control, and therefore, they never get enough money to get the thing going. So which one's true, which one's not? I think there's a bit of truth to both. But I think you want to take your advice from people who have credibility. So do you want to take it from the guy who's made millions of dollars, Jason Fried, or other people who say opposite stuff? I would go with Jason Fried. And his whole idea, I think, and this is what I agree with based off my own experience reading other people's opinion on this. You want to take what's needed. So if you really need investors' money, for instance, Sam Walton, when he was expanding Walmart, he got to a point where he couldn't do it on his own anymore. He had seen the success of every Walmart he built, and he wanted to expand across the entire nation. And this was the time to do it. Growth was what he needed to do. And he had exhausted all his resources. So he follows the same path as well. He first does everything he can, then he goes out to seek investors. I think what a lot of startups screw up on is that they do the opposite. They just get a lot of money initially just to show off. So that gets us to number 4. Number 4 thing that you need to do is place value on the customer. And this links back to what I just said. By giving up too much control to your investors, you end up relinquishing the focus, which should be on the customers. And I've heard this, variations of this from many successful people. Sam Walton, Jack Ma of Alibaba, all these billion-dollar guys. The general idea is that the customer is very, very important. And you want to make their experience, the product that you give them, their service, as great as possible. And by doing so, it will make everything else flow. It will make the business better. You'll make more money. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Long story short, like if you create the world's best product, if you help the customer that much, he's going to tell all his friends. Then, the best form of marketing happens, word of mouth marketing, and word of mouth referral, and then all sorts of stuff, testimonials, goodwill, reputation. It's probably like the most ethical and highest impact way of making the most money. So customers value a lot, and unfortunately, other stuff comes into play when you let investors come in. Now, investors are not always a bad thing, but just keep that in mind. Jack Ma says, customers first, then employees, then investors. I've heard variations on this from a lot of successful entrepreneurs. The general idea, though, the general premise, though, is customers and employees are really, really important. You want to do your best with both groups. That brings us to number three. The number three thing you want to do if you're creating a business, if you want to get this, if you already have a business and you want to make this like a really, really good business, is focus on the long term and realize that if you're taking on investors, sometimes, not always though, it will make you focus on the short term. So a lot of people don't really care about their business. And what I mean by that is their whole goal is to create this